Λοιπόν, είναι τιμή μου να έχω εδώ μαζί μου τον Alfred και τη Rosemary Morrow, όπου ο Alfred ήταν ο δάσκαλός μου στην Permaculture το 2018, όπου γνώρισα και επίσημα, πέρα από τα βιβλία, την Permaculture. Και η Rosemary Morrow είναι η δασκάλα του Alfred, οπότε έχω και το δασκαλό μου και τη δασκάλα του δασκάλου μου. Διπλή τιμή για μένα. Είναι στο δρόμο, γιατί η μία έρχεται από την Αυστραλία, ο άλλος έρχεται από την Ισπανία. Πηγαίνουν σε ένα training να δώσουν στη Λέσβο, όπου έχουν ασχοληθεί με την Permaculture για πρόσφυγες στο παρελθόν. Ήταν από τους πρώτους που το 2015 είχαν κάνει τα πρώτα σεμινάρια στη Λέσβο, στα κάμπ τότε με τους πρόσφυγες και στην ουσία εφαρμόζουν το κοινωνικό κομμάτι της Permaculture. Τι να πω, ότι έχουν ένα πολύ αξιόλογο έργο πίσω τους όσο αφορά την Permaculture και ειδικά στη διδασκαλία. Η Rosemary έχει γράψει κάποια βιβλία όσο αφορά τη διδασκαλία της Permaculture. Και πολύ κοινωνική δράση που, όπως θα καταλάβετε, η Permaculture πέρα από το κομμάτι του σχεδιασμού χωραφιών, κατοικιών, αγροδασοκομικών συστημάτων και νερού, αφορά πολύ και το πώς εμείς οι άνθρωποι συμβιώνουμε και με το οικοσύστημα αλλά και γύρω μας. Should I ask if it's recording? Okay. Ωραία. Εγώ θα πω, επειδή με ξέρετε όλοι, δεν χρειάζεται να πω το όνομά μου, ότι αυτό είναι μια ατομική πρωτοβουλία, ότι δεν υπάρχει κάποιος ας πούμε χρηματοδοτικός οργανισμός, ότι είναι τελείως αυτοοργανωμένο αυτή η εκδήλωση. Ότι εδώ στα Chania υπάρχουν κάποια παραδείγματα όπου η Permaculture εφαρμόζεται και θέλουμε έτσι κάπως να το τονίσουμε μέσα και από αυτή την εκδήλωση. Η ιδέα μου, και έτσι όπως έχω βάλει και στην αφίσα, είναι το Community Lab, ή αλλιώς κοινοτικό εργαστήρι, το οποίο είναι να δημιουργηθούν χώροι στην Ελλάδα μετά από μια εμπειρία την οποία είχα σε οικοκοινότητα στο εξωτερικό, όπου η κοινότητα μπορεί να ξαναδημιουργηθεί γύρω από μια γη η οποία αναγεννάται μέσω της Permaculture και με διάφορα εργαλεία, τα οποία κάποια θα παρουσιάσουν και σήμερα οι ομιλητές, για το πώς μπορούμε να φέρουμε την κοινωνική αλλαγή. Αυτό είναι το όραμα του κοινοτικού εργαστηρίου του κοινωνικού εγχειρήματος. Αυτά, δεν θα σας αποσχολήσω άλλο. Θα πω μόνο ότι το Σάββατο, είστε όλοι ευπρόσδεκτοι, έχουμε ένα δωρεάν εργαστήριο στο κτήμα στη Συντροφιά όσο αφορά την ενεργητική καλλιέργεια και τα σκευάσματα μικροοργανισμών, που είναι μέρος της πρακτικής της Permaculture, οπότε είστε ευπρόσδεκτοι σε αυτό. Και ότι η εκδήλωση είναι, όπως είπα πριν, αυτοοργανωμένη και χρηματοδοτούμενη και γι' αυτό υπάρχει ένα κουτί οικονομικής ενίσχυσης έξω. Αυτά. Καλή ακρόαση, να περάσετε όμορφα και να κάνετε μετά όσες περισσότερες ερωτήσεις μπορείτε τη Rosemary, γιατί και στον Alfred δεν ξέρω πότε θα τους έχουμε ξανά εδώ πέρα μαζί μας.
Evharisto, Christos. I want to start by saying thank you to Christos for organizing this event, and also that I'm very happy to be here because I used to live in Chania almost 20 years ago. So to come back and to be here to collaborate means a lot to me. So I'm going to talk for a bit about how I became involved in permaculture, what is permaculture, why I think it's meaningful and useful, and then Rosemary will go into more detail about permaculture around the world and how it can be useful here in Crete. So I grew up in a small town you probably haven't heard of. It's called Chicago. There's a few Greeks that I grew up with there. And even though I was surrounded by a concrete jungle, for some reason I always had a love of the green, a real love of nature. And that love of nature only grew stronger when I discovered the old-growth temperate rainforests of the Americas. my love for these forests became painful very quickly because in the 1990s they were being cut down very rapidly. So I left university and I just threw myself into the campaign to try to defend these ancient forests. So I started organizing protests and hanging off of buildings and bridges with signs, and also sat up in a platform in some of the big trees. So that was a technique that we called tree sitting, where if we were sitting in the trees, the idea was that the loggers couldn't come and cut them down. So on this day, I had an epiphany. So English word with Greek roots. I had a big realization because my platform, way high up in the tree, was supported by a rope that went down to the road below and through a truck which was blocking the logging road. And we were naive young Americans who believed that civil disobedience has a role in society and that people were more important than profit, which I quickly learned was not often the case, because the moment the police, and so we had the idea that they wouldn't touch this rope that was keeping me up in the tree for a long time. They would instead, the truck would block the road, they couldn't log that day, and they would have to send up police climbers to take me down. But immediately, when the police and the loggers arrived, they got ready to cut the rope. And so people were shouting up at me, "Get off the platform." And it was surreal because I was shouting down to them, "I can't get off the platform." And so I watched with my life in the balance as they cut the rope, and fortunately they held the rope, moved the truck, the loggers came through, and then I had a day to watch them logging the forest here, while all around me, behind me, was this ancient, special, sacred forest. So my epiphany was that as long as we're only fighting these defensive actions, as long as the capitalist system rewards destruction instead of conservation, there's only so much that we can do by protesting. Another realization that I had was that even though I felt completely justified to put my life on the line to defend this forest, I was still following the pattern of humans separate from nature, because I didn't know anything about that forest. I knew that there were grizzly bears and wolves and mountain lions and big trees, but I had just come from Chicago. I had no idea how the forest worked, what were the relationships between the species. I was still a human apart from nature. So I realized that I needed to do something where I could observe and interact with nature. And I also realized that, the glorious revolutionary day that I was dreaming of at that time may never come. And that it's important at times to actually live the life and the world that we want to live instead of only fighting against the system. So that's when I discovered permaculture. And permaculture is it's a holistic design system for creating a society that can adapt to the crises that we're facing, such as the climate crisis, economic crises, the rise of the far right. It's not just about gardening. Most people, when they think about permaculture, think about growing food, they think about gardens, and it is that, but it's much more. It's about renewable energy, it's about natural building, it's about social economy, it's about governance structures that prioritize people over profit. But what's special about permaculture is that because it's holistic, it looks at the whole. It doesn't separate things into individual branches. It looks at how these different fields work together to create an efficient and resilient system. And permaculture has 3 ethics: care of the earth, care of people, and fair share. So I think this is also something that makes it special. It's not just about taking care of the earth. Taking care of people is just as important. Because one realization is that without if we don't have ecological and social justice at the same time, we will have neither. And then the third ethic, fair share. It's about how do we design our systems so that our species doesn't take more than its fair share of all of the Earth's resources, and that within human societies, that the global economy doesn't distribute radically, on a radical and equal basis as it does now, the Earth's resources. Because we know that we can cover the basic needs of every person on this planet. The only problem is the economic system that we live under and the way that resources are distributed. So for me, this is a special important thing about permaculture is we have these ethics that everything that we do, we try to run through and make sure it's coherent with all of these ethics at the same time. So permaculture is not revolutionary, it's solutionary. It's not a protest movement. It's about finding practical solutions to the problems that we're facing. And as permaculture co-founder Bill Mollison said, even though the problems of the world are becoming increasingly complex, the solutions are embarrassingly simple. So it's a practical, hands-on, positive movement. However, it is radical in its nature. And one definition of permaculture that I like is that it's a revolution disguised as organic gardening. Because really for me, permaculture is not about having 10 different kinds of organic muffins at the local health food store that most people can't even afford. It's not about building luxury eco-houses in a time of housing crisis and cost of living crisis. For me, it's not about recycling. Yes, recycling is important, but recycling will never offset the consumption of whatever plastic crap that was in the first place. So for me, permaculture is much more about meeting people's basic needs, such as my friend and colleague Paulinho, who is a Congolese refugee living at a refugee settlement in Uganda, who is teaching hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of refugees how to grow food and feed themselves, which is becoming increasingly important as Trump has cut off US aid and people are increasingly hungry in Africa. For me, permaculture is about finding real solutions to the climate crisis. You know, it's not about buying fancy high-tech green solutions as much as it is about engaging in the root causes of the climate crisis, which are often as much social as they are ecological. And for me, it's also recognizing that we're in a time of peak resources. So resources such as petroleum, gas, phosphorus, building sand being used in construction are all finite resources on a finite planet. Now, the farmers here will probably know that there's something called peak phosphorus, meaning that at some point in the near future, perhaps as early as 8 years from now, the production of phosphorus used in industrial agriculture is predicted to reach its peak. We cannot extract more of it. The production will decline at that point, and that will cause crisis in industrial agriculture, which is feeding, you know, a huge percentage of the world's population. And agronomists have no solutions for this right now. So for me, in working in permaculture, I want to find solutions to the problem of finite resources being consumed rapidly on a finite planet. So I came to Greece for the first time a long time ago, when there was still a drachma, when before the euro, when the cost of living was much more affordable. And I came and I fell in love with Greece. And I came again right before the Olympics, and it was such a difference because I could see that Athens was flooded with new German cars, new investment, shiny everything. And even at that time I thought, oof, this is a bit scary. This might not end very, very well. And it came back again also later on after the 2008 crash. And I spent a lot of time in Exarchia before the Navarino Park was, when it was still a parking lot, when there were still cars. And I remember one conversation I had with a comrade friend here at this square. And she asked me about permaculture. And so I explained what is permaculture, why I believe in it, and so on, da da da. And as she was smoking a Marlboro cigarette and drinking a Nescafe and eating an industrial souvlaki, she said to me, I do not like the permaculture. We must destroy everything first, and then we will build a new world. So I thought about that for a moment, and I said to her, you know, I think you're going to be starving on the ruins of the civilization that you just destroyed before you have time to build a new world. She didn't like that very much. But at that time, it reaffirmed something that I have felt for a long time, and I still feel, which is we need to protest against injustice. We need to defend the natural world. We need to defend our society, our world, from the rise of the far right. And when Golden Dawn is out on the streets attacking migrants, we need to be there. This is important. But we also need to be building the world that we want to live in. We need to be creating a new story, a story that's attractive to people in society. And we need it all. It's not that we need one of those, we need all of it, and we need more of it. So then, not too long after I moved to Chania, I moved to Rosemary and lived there for 3 months, and had a very special time there. I really learned a lot. And you know, the view of the White Mountains from my room up there still stays with me. And something else that stays with me from my time here is how the people I met at Rosanera still have this connection to the land and still understand the importance of the land, which is something that I felt that people in Athens, just like people in San Francisco or New York or Paris, to a large degree have lost. Or while they're living in the metropolis, it's hard to understand the importance of the land. That it's not just about social struggle, it's about how we connect, how do we interact, how do we meet our needs through the land. And I see that Crete has such a special opportunity. You know, the soil, the landscape, the sea around it, the forests, the olive groves. You know, there's such amazing potential here that so many places in the world have now lost because of the total destruction of their landscapes. So this is something that Rosemary will now talk about, how permaculture could be useful here. So after, you know, when I was here in Crete, I felt that I didn't have really anything that I could contribute. And I wanted to be able to have skills to be able to work on building the world that I wanted to live in. So some years later, I took a permaculture teacher training with this person next to me. And Rosemary had created a permaculture teacher training after 4 decades of traveling the world in order to have a multiplier effect, in order to spread permaculture around the world. And that was something that inspired me as her student, and so I became a permaculture educator. And then some years later, I came back to Crete and did a permaculture training with the Pelico Association, which was another really, really inspiring experience for me. So some years after that, Rosemary co-founded a global network called Permaculture for Refugees. And the idea is to develop ways in which permaculture can be useful to refugees, migrants, internally displaced people, and how can we learn from them as well? How can it be an equal exchange through solidarity? It's not just some top-down charity, but how can we learn also from their resilience, their adaptability to incredibly hard circumstances, and also their their positivity. The refugees that I have worked with, I have really learned a lot about how, in spite of such really drastic circumstances that they've lived, they're often so positive about life. So, you know, I'm the grandson of two migrants. Both of my grandfathers migrated to the United States, one from Sweden, one from Germany, after the First World War, when their country, when Germany was in ruins. Sweden was facing hunger. My grandfather's family in Sweden was in famine. They were eating grass and bark off the trees. But my grandfathers happened to be born with the color of skin that the United States wanted to welcome at that time. But for me, I'm completely committed to doing what I can do so that when people need to leave their countries because of war, poverty, climate chaos, that we can welcome them, just like my grandfathers were welcomed. And having this understanding of mass migration, which there's now about 120 million refugees in the world, and that number is increasing, and the aid and support to them is decreasing. Having an understanding of this and having a sense of solidarity with people in these circumstances doesn't mean that we don't need to give up the agriculture that we love. It doesn't mean that we need to give up gardening. It doesn't mean that we don't love the natural world just as much. But what it means is that we have a more complex, whole vision of what's happening on the planet at this time. So one reason that Rosemary and I are, the main reason that Rosemary and I are here in Greece, aside from visiting Christos and being with you tonight, is that we are going to do a permaculture teacher training with a focus on refugees on Lesbos next week. And so because I've been copying Rosemary for about 14 years now, first in becoming a permaculture teacher, then becoming a trainer of trainers, and then also combining permaculture teacher training with solidarity with refugees and migrants. I've now organized 3 of these courses in Spain and 1 in Ukraine. And now we're going to Lesbos to do the same thing. And I want to mention that the Capoeira Club here in Chania made a very generous donation to this training that happened last November in Spain, where we were able to offer scholarships for 16 permaculture educators and activists from Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria. And I have to say it was one of the most inspiring, worthwhile things that I've ever done with my life, is to be together with these people. And next week we'll be in Lesbos with 3 people from Palestine as well. So in closing, I want to say that even though it seems like we're facing the end of the world now, and the destruction and the genocide in Gaza is absolutely horrifying, I still have hope, and I still want to keep doing what I can do to make a positive change. And I think about the Chinese symbol for crisis, which is actually a combination of 2 signs, danger and opportunity. And I think that that's exactly the moment that we're in at this moment in time in history. It's incredibly dangerous, but because the system is failing so obviously, we now have the opportunity to help build the world that we want to live in. And in closing, I want to just share a quote that I think is very appropriate to permaculture and very appropriate at this moment in time, which is from Buenaventura Durruti, who is an anti-fascist during the Spanish Civil War. And he said, "We are not in the least afraid of ruins. The destroyers may blast and lay bare this world before they exit the stage of history. But we carry a new world in our hearts, and this world is growing as we speak. Because we are nature defending ourselves." Thank you.
Πώς πάμε με τα αγγλικά του Alfred? Εντάξει, κατανοητός. Μπορώ να μιλήσει λίγο πιο σιγά ή... Πολύ καλά. Εντάξει, τέλεια. Ωραία.
hear me now? Yeah. Would you just say hello to the person next to you, just in case you don't know them or you haven't seen them since for a little while? Just say something nice to the person next to you. Thank you. We're going to do something just a little bit quite different. So listening to Alfred, he gave you his perspective on permaculture and his own permaculture journey, as we say, his life in permaculture. I'm not going to do that. Mine's so long and complicated and a little bit crazy that I'm not sure that it's the right thing. So I think we'll just leave it. What I'd like to talk to you about this evening is global permaculture. So when you're sitting here, 6,000, the base permaculture design courses, which are the basis of all permaculture learning and cover agronomy and forestry and plants and ethical money and land distribution and design. There are 6,000 people at the moment doing a course right around the world. And I heard someone say, permaculture is just for the middle class. And I thought, well, we should really look at what is happening. Would that be okay with you? Right, and you're going to help?
Yeah.
All right, thanks. So what we'd like to talk about is people who did a permaculture course, and while they were there, they thought, I'd like to do this, or I'd like to do that. And they did so many wonderful different things, it becomes a bit amazing. Now, it's not the teacher. It is the content of permaculture is so good that there seems to be something for everyone. So, Tina Lemberis, do you know Tina? She translated the book. Tina did a course and she said, I'd like to translate this into Greek. Okay, fine. But that book can be important for people's understanding, or check if the knowledge is correct, because you can look up the references. It's not all made up an opinion. Or you could talk about Fotini. She decided she was going to work with refugees and teach in Attica, I think. And the next thing, she's employed to work for Norwegian Refugee Service to teach permaculture in the camps there. So it isn't the sort of course where you do brain science or teaching and that's all you do. People find what they like and then they go. So I'm just going to mention a few places. So there's Greece. Greece is a bit funny, but it's up there, green. Thank you. Whereas down in South Africa, John and Zero decided to teach in the slums of South Africa during apartheid, a place called Soweto, where there were riots. So the next thing, John has developed the most interesting type of meeting needs and bringing people together in South Africa. I mean, no one says go and do this and no one pays them. They all just run away and say, I'm going to do that. Mpona in Cambodia, I was there while the Khmer Rouge was still active, and so you get caught up in a road ambush, landmine goes off beside you, and they asked me to teach permaculture, and Mpona said, I can teach the Department of Women's Affairs. I'll teach women. Well, she taught the women in her PERSAT, she taught them in Kompong Chhnang, she taught them in Kompong. I think she taught pretty much across the country when people were thin as a toothpick and starving. She went out on a little blue motorbike with 3 or 4 women. This was after she'd done her course, and she said, this is what we need. Then some of those women started a nursery. Some of them, the children sold green at the taxi stand. Some of them grew gardens. But the interesting thing is, doing the same course, she ran away But she also used her knowledge and persuasive powers, and she ended up an MP in the Cambodian Parliament for Women's Affairs. So, you know, it's quite a surprise. In Vietnam, Nguyen Van Gia, after we finished the course, he got a job with World Bank, and instead of putting in big levee banks to hold back the water, he decided they needed wetlands. Amazing. You know, it's not in the course you go up and do wetland. Later on in Malaysia, Nurani Abu Bakir, Malaysia, by the way, has 5 million refugees, so they're mainly from Myanmar, and they're not allowed to go to school, so she brought in refugees from Myanmar. She taught them in their own language, and then they started schools. And the children in those schools are all learning permaculture syllabus. I mean, I couldn't imagine this. If I were writing a project, they'll grow peas, beans, corn, potatoes, and fix their houses. You know, I haven't got the imagination or anything to do it. Wei Win, working with the People's Republic in China, in Shanghai, said we need to do a permaculture city. And so she talked to the People's Republic, and she got a book translated, and now they've run the first permaculture conference for permaculturists in China, and they're building with traditional knowledge, the species, the water use, sustainability. That's amazing. Hu Yi in Taiwan is using it to try to build a resilient base because they feel that the People's Republic might take them over at any time and that they need the skills and knowledge to meet their own needs. Can I tell you some more? Yeah. Is that all right? Yeah. Okay, because I've got quite a lot.
Do you have Taiwan in Morrow?
Which? That's the Republic. It's somewhere there, and that's Taiwan. And so, Charlie in Australia was doing a course, and he said, I'd like to write permaculture songs. So he was a physicist or mathematician. His family were horrified. He stopped doing that, and he said, I'm going to write permaculture songs. And now he travels around, he's sung for UN, international conferences, all the words of permaculture. Do you? Yeah, we'll soon be in Barcelona. But Charles in France was 18 years old, and we were working at that stage through orphanages in Vietnam, Cambodia, because to teach in an orphanage, the food was shocking and the children are usually starved. So we thought, teach the children to grow food. So in Uganda, right on the equator, bang on the equator, right that place, not a circle in Uganda, yeah. We were teaching there, and Charles was an 18-year-old AIDS orphan. And his parents had died and he'd been in St. Jude's orphanage for a while. And we taught, and you know what 18-year-olds are like, they're, oh yeah, I know, and so what, and she'll be right. Anyway, last year Charles ran the first East Asian permaculture conference for Kenya, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Ethiopia. Extraordinary. How can that young chap, who was just a kid sitting there, take that and run with it? I've nearly finished because you might go to sleep. In Timor-Leste, where Indonesia invaded and it was back to ground zero, they started Permatil, and they've done the first international book of permaculture around the equator, hot, wet permaculture. Not cool, temperate, such as Europe and parts of Australia. So they've done these beautiful volumes, and now every child in East Timor learns permaculture for 10 days in school camps. We don't know what the results will be. If they're results from a 72-hour course, what will they do? Okay. Other places. In Vietnam, in 1986, some of you may not have been born, but Vietnam had 27 cars and telephone was locked in a box, and there were 1 million bicycles in Hanoi, and every bridge and every power station between Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi was bombed. The FAO sent its staff to learn permaculture, and they did it with all the agricultural departments right through Vietnam to start. Yeah, nothing. Amazing. Okay, the United Nations has accepted permaculture for refugees with its Sustainable Development Goals. I don't know if any of this is a surprise to you, but it surprises me. And way up in the duck, a woman wrote to me and said, since doing a course in 2011 in Hong Kong, I have now taught 37,000 farmers in Ladakh how to design for water and trees and food and productivity. You nearly fall over because I don't have those skills. But you know that expression, your jaw drops? How amazing what people find in permaculture to use. In Nepal, Chris Evans has created the most incredible centre for permaculture in the upper Himalayas. But when there was a big earthquake, huge earthquake in Kathmandu, it was the permaculture gardens that were safe from falling buildings and broken, and people came there to eat, and they had a cow there and they could get milk for the babies. I mean, it's little detail, and I hope it's not too uninteresting. In Afghanistan, we taught a lot of people who were also peace activists, desperately committed peace activists. And they were about to start the first Afghani NGO when the Taliban moved in 3 years ago. And most of them have left, and Portugal has given them a home. But what is interesting, the orphanages and there are orphanages wherever you get war, you say how many orphanages? Very few orphanages in Cambodia now, not many in Vietnam. You probably don't have many in Greece. Not many, I would imagine. Am I right? Yeah, because orphanages are a result of war. And the orphanage gardens that we had done with a group called Maboba's Promise in Afghanistan were feeding the local people as well. So, and also when the Indonesians moved into East Timor, there were some permaculture training centres up there, and the families sent their children that they didn't want to be killed by the East Timorese. So there was food up there for all those people because people are thinking longer term and thinking through a disaster. That's probably enough examples, but it is very, very surprising when people do permaculture, how they'll come and say, I think I found what I want to do, and I think, oh, you want to be a teacher like me? And they say, no, I'm going to make little films for this group of people. You know, it's amazing because I can't do it. So what is extraordinary, thanks, I'm going to finish in just a second, is that permaculture is also used in different professions. So we have got museum curators setting up new displays, and they're working with permaculture principles and ethics. We had the head of the fraud squad, this is so unlikely, in New South Wales Police, who would bring the new young trainee police in after she'd done a course and say, right, I want you to always think of care of people and sharing and work on the edges and integrate people. And she would go through the principles of permaculture and ask them to work to those socially. Eunice Neves in Portugal decided she could use the principles to bring the refugees and integrate them in a year program, and we've got success for every single person, and we've supported 60 women, girls and young people to get out of Portugal. I've never said this before for anyone, and when I started making the list, I thought, this is amazing. FAO, Vietnam, museums, music. It just seems to me that there's something there that people want. And of course, one of the main permaculture principles is work with solutions. So that's what you said, solution oriented. So if Alfred keeps saying we can't do that, it's impossible, I'll say, what's your solution? And he'll say, the government, what's your solution? What do you think could be done? So it's a very positive approach to a mentality that finds it a dark world. I would love you to prepare some questions, and perhaps we can answer them later, because I'd like to know what you're thinking about that. I think it's quite extraordinary. Could never have imagined it. It's not up, you know. Thank you, Alfred. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we can get a comment. Who would like to comment for a minute?
Ρωτάει άμα κάποιος θα ήθελε να σχολιάσει κάτι. Έτσι, άμα το καταλάβατε. Ναι. Ναι. Ωραία. Το air conditioner. Αυτό που στο Δημήτρη, ξέρεις.
Από δίπλα είναι, θα πάρω τηλέφωνο.
Πρέπει να πάω πάνω. Σε έχει παρέσει το air conditioner. Έτσι. Νομίζω ακουγόμαστε. Ωραία.
Thank you very much for sharing all these experiences in short. So, in my mind, the life 200 years ago or even ago, people had information about the natural way of living. And here in Crete, or in other islands of Greece, when you speak about natural life, still people remember, and they know from mouth to mouth how to deal with the water, plants, and all of these things. So I think we need to find a bridge between the locals, and so that when they hear permaculture in terms of communication, they don't understand so much. So I wonder if you have any ideas of how we can make this bridge more short, perhaps.
Thank you. That might need to be translated. Do you want to say it in Greek? It'll be easier if you do.
You're fine.
Done. Thank you. Someone else? Question or comment? I think you'll find we might be looking at it in the next section. Would you like to just stand up for a minute and stretch, because it's an eye would.
Hello. I'm not sure for my English. I will try. Welcome, and it was very nice gathering. I want a comment. I will start from a phrase Mr. Decker said about someone he met in Exarchia, and he told him that we have to destroy this world to build another one. About permaculture, my imagination goes that we don't have to destroy the world, but we have to break the fences, at least. Because for me, the biggest problem is the private property of the people and the fences everywhere. So everybody wanted to defend his small piece of land that most of the times it is abandoned, but he can't break his relationship with the property, the private property. So I think for me, is this the beginning? It's not, it's to destroy the borders, to start connecting, because especially in Crete, where the landscape is amazing, you can make amazing designs for permaculture, but if you see on maps or the property, the land is in small pieces. Everybody owns 2 hectares in 10 pieces spread. And before 50 years, where the communities were alive and the villages were alive, it was something working. For example, the sheep of the neighbor could go to eat the grass. That's my comment.
Thank you so much. You might find it a bit helpful in the next section we do in a minute. We'll take just one more question quickly, then we're going to deal with islands and islands and permaculture. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for your presentations and kind words for Greece and Crete. One question. Okay, I just had a very short introduction on permaculture a few years ago at Larissa at COP over there at Nationals. However, I would like to know if there are any measurements and let's say activities from current permaculture practices regarding the problem of microplastics in the earth systems.
Yes, okay. Can I write that down and come back to it if you agree, if it's not urgent? Thanks. I think one of the most important things here at the moment, and now becoming local, is going to be about islands. And years ago, someone from Barbados said to me, what about permaculture for islands? So Philippines have 11,000 islands, right? Micronesia has so many thousand islands. There are probably 100,000 islands across the world, and permaculture seems easy when you could just cross a boundary or get some trade or bring in some water. But islands have special needs and special restrictions, and I'm sure you can tell me about those. That some are, strangely enough, surrounded by water. You've got your volcanic islands, you've got your coral islands, you've got a whole range, and islands are going to be increasingly affected by climate change, especially the mountainous islands, because the little bays are going to be flooded. I looked up the research, and by the year, end of the century, the Mediterranean will rise 1 metre, which will take out almost every beach and port in Greece. So how do you plan for a future? Because to some extent with climate disruption, we're having to plan for disasters and put them into place quite quickly. Now, we can't totally rely on governments. They can't send a helicopter to take you off the building. They can't put out fires of huge extent. So what we say is the local community. And for that, I would like to introduce the idea of a bioregion. And a bioregion is an association of people and land that people recognise. So we could look at Creta as a bioregion. And you would know others. There's a river, there's a road, there's the sea, there's a big mountain, and over the mountain people live differently. So we're talking about bioregions, probably a few thousand people. Now, I've written down a few words, and this is future thinking for islands. And so we're thinking about preparation for disasters has to happen personally. In your garden, on your balcony, on your rooftop, maybe in a deserted farm up the hill. We need to protect local economies, and we need to meet the local needs for water, food, energy, storage, housing, and we must keep our environment, or we will cook, or we will flood, or we will have a very dreadful time. So I don't know what's important for you, but would you like to just tell someone near you what's important for you? You know, in the future, protecting, designing for. Just think of what is going to be critical as islanders to preparing for the future. Yep. Absolutely, yeah. So there are very special ways of dealing with water on islands, and that is absolutely, yeah, it's like being on a ship, isn't it? You can be on a ship surrounded by water, but salt water, if it runs out. Okay, and it's not a matter of desalination, it's a matter of understanding the geology and geography to be able to get more water into aquifers, more water into soils, water into plants. That's all part of the system, but water is probably the number one world problem. Too much, too little, rising seas, too much in the sky, floods here, not enough there. Water is something that we used to understand and we don't anymore. And we used to have traditional management systems and they're not working anymore. So we need to really think in new ways about water. Okay. So this is a bioregion, and what we look at when we're doing a permaculture design for a bioregion, what's coming in? Money, tourists, boats. What else comes in? Televisions, yeah, computers. And what goes out? What is exported and what is lost from the area? So sometimes it's culture, sometimes it's young people, sometimes it's industry. So we do an understanding for an island of what's coming in and what's being lost. When we look at what's coming in, we try to block it if we can and develop our own. So if it's honey, let's grow more honey. If it's water, let's store and find more water. If it's food, what can we produce ourselves? In thinking like that, we do an inventory, it's called a stock take. We then come up with jobs. We're going to need more people to do this, more people to do that, because we don't want to accept the coming in, and the main reason is our money goes out. bioregical systems. You find someone from the school, know someone in the bank, know someone in the local area, know someone in the market, who knows someone in the library. So you really have this strength of a social network. It's not as good in cities and not as strong, but it's a great advantage, especially if you can build those ecosystems. Yep. Right, now, these bioregions and islands are built on certain rights, and there are lots of rights. The two fundamental ones are right to land to grow your own food and build a house. And I think that's being lost. The right to have land to grow your own food and care for it, and the right to live on it. And that is something in permaculture we would fight for. We would find government land, we would find land with a school, land with a hotel, land somewhere, and we would say people can get access. Hospital, public land. Okay. The other thing we aim for is to green the towns, because global warming in particular is getting faster, much faster. And the only thing that really works as effective air conditioning for outside life is greening your cities. Your shade, your trees, your gardens, logias, pergolas, rooftops, balconies, all must be green to provide some protection against heat. I think in France, when the heat wave went through, I forget how many people died of heat, but it was huge. It was far more than died of cold. So heat, getting overheated itself, is a human danger, and also lots of animals don't live. Okay. Here's a critical one, but you have to start early. We have to protect our coasts. We have to have coastal forests and towns, because as the seas rise, we want them to be able to be absorbed by coastal forests. I was walking on the shore of Vietnam coast one day with some local government people, and they said, what should we do? The Pacific Ocean is bringing in 1 metre of sand and puts it on the rice field. What can we do? How can we get the sand off the rice field? And I said, you have lost the mangroves and the bamboos and the casuarina. You had thick, thick coastal forests of wetland, and you've cut them down to grow more rice. However, if you have what are called littoral forests, wide coastal forests, stop the wind, stop the salt, catch the sand, habitat for fish, breeding animals, you can tell me, you know what it would do. I went back in about 3 years, and that was a comment, you need a coastal forest. They were doing it. There was this great forest they planted. So amazing. People are wonderful. They do a lot of things from just an idea. Now we talk about money. So in permaculture, we say we give away surplus to our need. If it's more than I need, I give it, or sell it, or I share it. However, bioregionally, we share the money, but we try to keep the money in our bioregion. So let's see, if I give Alfred €100, and he gets on a plane tomorrow, does he spend it in Greece, in Crete? He might spend it back in Barcelona. What we want to do is to get Alfred to spend his money here and not rely on tourists, because another pandemic and no tourists, have to have what's called a backup for economy, a backup economy that works for the people. It's called bioregional money, and we work with getting money in but holding it in your area. So if you have to employ a carpenter or a cook or someone, make sure they're local and it's not international business. Every Friday afternoon in Town, Katoomba. Big white trucks drive up and two big men get out and they've got guns and they go into the bank and they go into the credit union and they take the money, and there's all the electronic money as well. It's sent to Paris, London, New York, Germany. So I want to go to the local co-op, buy from the local farmer. I want my money to stay in my bioregion. And you start to think like that. If I put it with this international company or this international shop, gone. Your bioregion starts to get poorer. Like open, let the blood go out, let the money go out. So holding the money in is critical. I don't even finish. That's my vision for every village in Crete. Do you like it? Yeah. Shady, cool, it'll bring water, food for children, streets to play. We can clean all the grey water. There we are. So each of us, in any way we like, whether it's solar panels or regenerative agriculture, can contribute to the island's abundance, welfare and growth. And these are permaculture social sphere. They're not the environmental. The environmental is about food and forests and orchards and chickens and goats and, camels and buffalo and whatever your animals are. This is social permaculture, and I thought it might apply quite well. There's likely to be a bit of a world movement about islands because you know what happened in the pandemic, and if that had gone on much longer, it's really hard. So we say, you can't make a person self-sufficient, only a bioregion. Self-sufficient means can meet their own needs. A bioregion working together can meet the needs of the community, perhaps not perfectly, but very well. And there are ways to do this, and that's in the course. Gosh, who's asleep? We should all be asleep by now. Oh, we'll start again then. Are you ready? Okay. Thank you everyone for your time and attention.
Ωραία. Έχω ένα μικρό σχόλιο να πω μετά από αυτά που ακούσατε. Should I talk in English so that you can understand as well? I'm a bit confused about Ne. A small comment about after your
Questions, comments?
there will be. I'll make a small comment and then okay, and then questions. Προσπαθώ. Καταλαβαίνω και εγώ λίγο περισσότερο γιατί έκανα αυτή την εκδήλωση. Προσπαθώ να συνδέσω αυτό το οποίο μας συμβαίνει εμάς εδώ και το πόσο συμβαίνει ταυτόχρονα σε όλο τον πλανήτη. Δηλαδή τα προβλήματα που αντιμετωπίζουμε εδώ πέρα είναι παγκόσμια. Οι λύσεις είναι τοπικές, αλλά τα προβλήματα είναι παγκόσμια. Οπότε το να νιώθουν, εγώ και πιστεύω και εσείς σιγά σιγά μέρος ενός παγκόσμιου κινήματος ανθρώπων που προσπαθούν να φέρουν την αλλαγή, εμένα τουλάχιστον με κάνει να νιώθω καλύτερα. Σαν μια συλλογική ταυτότητα από τα κάτω ανθρώπων των οποίων προσπαθούμε να φέρουμε μια αλλαγή και λύση στα προβλήματα που υπάρχουν. I'm just saying that I'm realizing why I'm doing this event is like to make people feel that we are part of a global problem, but also a global solution, which is part of the permaculture. Yeah. So, ερωτήσεις, questions to the speakers. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Lefteris. Thank you very much for all the very useful and interesting information. I'm new to this, so I'm not very knowledgeable about everything in permaculture, and I might be missing something. But one of the things that I'm struggling with is this solution-oriented positivity, and how do we bridge it with the reality that a lot of the problems are global or beyond us, and they're stemming from something much bigger than us. I mean, people here talk about the over-tourism here, the housing crisis here. Most of the problems stem from the fact that, or you mentioned that we should be shopping locally, but at the same time, if I don't have money to live day by day, I will probably just shop as cheap as I can. So I love the idea of, yes, let's be solution oriented, but at the same time, how do we keep active, and how do we stay active on the problem that is probably going to keep on hitting us? And I don't know how, like, I'm totally in agreement with, yes, we need to keep acting and keep doing these small things that will help us all, but is it enough? After all?
Good question. Is it enough? I'm not sure, and I have no illusions about the global capitalism that we're living under and how hard it is to create alternatives to it and how hard it is to escape it. But that's why I think that what we can be doing is we can fight and protest against the system, we can create working alternatives, and we can help to tell a new story. Are we going to win? I don't know. Is it enough? I don't know. But I don't know what else to do with my life besides those things. Bill Mollison, this co-founder of Permaculture, is said to have invented the phrase, think globally and act locally. And so I think that while we can inform ourselves about what's happening in the world and the big forces that we're dealing with, I think that just developing these local small solutions, such as food growing cooperatives, it's just a perfect practical thing that any of us can do. And yeah, a lot of people who don't have the money to buy organic food are going to be buying whatever they can afford to buy, and that's the reality, of course. And then one of the things that we can do is just develop local production and offer it as much of equitable price as we can. It's a start. But I don't know if it's enough.
What we've done, we've infiltrated local government. So we have a government area that's 120 kilometres wide and 27 villages. And we have trained in a lot of the staff. So the administrators done permaculture, and so have some of the land planners, and so have some of the economists. So they are ready to adopt new practices, and they're very aware of what's needed because they all are, even if they don't do it. So we found it very, very useful to work with that local government so that they will say things like, we don't want plastic bags, soft plastic bags. They're not allowed anymore here. In 6 months is the last day for soft plastic. That sort of thing we can get through relatively easily. Protection of waterways, pieces of land that have environmental value. We're now working on social housing, and it's because the staff of local government can then bring in regulations or support projects. So if you're working in your local government, it can be powerful. It won't do everything all the time because they've got pressure from companies and other government, but you can go a long way.
Maybe I'll just add one more thing, which is that this entire system is based to a degree on finite resources like cheap petroleum. And it's not going to last forever. I thought, it's true that I thought in the 1990s that the system was going to crash any day now. And 30 years later, here we are. But there are physical limits to the planet, such as, the extremely rapid consumption of finite resources will not continue forever. And in addition, the climate crisis is accelerating. So business as usual really will not be able to continue as it is now. So then as traumatic as that will be for many people, it also gives an opportunity for us to build alternatives, because we will have to. There won't be anything else.
So there was some truth in that PhD lady that said that we have to wait until the world collapses. And then live.
Maybe.
I think we don't know where the next disaster will actually come from. It's often not the thing we expect. So we didn't expect the United States government that would start reducing the support for international projects for health and doing good work. Now, if that sort of behaviour and action goes on again and longer, the world economy can break. And what are the reserves we've got? Knowledge is a reserve, food's a reserve, water's a reserve. All these non-dollar or non-euro assets, we start to count the non-euro assets we've got for living in times of difficulty to be able to teach others. It's a way of thinking. I didn't notice COVID because I've got a very small garden, but it was sufficient. You know, it was fine. Yeah. Someone else, I thought. Who was someone? Is someone a someone? What do you think would work for this island? What do you think?
I'll explain. So he was asking how to make a bridge between the people who lived here a long time and have some tradition methods that worked, and this permaculture.
It's not so difficult because for quite a while in Italy and in Portugal and in Spain, farmers' lives were terrible because the land was actually degraded. So they were walking with goat skin to the well and get the well and then the donkey and push it uphill with the... Permaculture would take the best of what they know and then say, with some solar panels, with more water in the soil, with more shade, so you can get a beautiful blend of old and new in technologies with permaculture, and people are doing this. You don't have to live as your grandparents did, walking a long, long way and carrying heavy bundles. You know, Ethiopian children have to walk 12 kilometres to pick up wood to come back every day. That's not traditionally interesting at all. And some of the things that were in the past that my great-grandparents did in Greece, because they were Corviot, weren't really wonderful, blissful village living. So getting to the point where the two can mix. There's some very, very good technology and ideas. A lot of them are about restoring landscapes, restoring soils, getting fertility up, you know. So there is a lot, but can you stay and we'll have this conversation till breakfast? Can you stay till breakfast and we'll get going? I could offer you a lot of ideas. There are a lot of ideas in and fairly systematic, so you can see what you would like to do and why. Someone? Where's someone?
Rob, can I add something? Part of my definition of permaculture is I'm defining permaculture as a set of techniques that are mostly inspired by indigenous practices. And part of traditional knowledge is indigenous practices. So when we teach about shade and bioclimatic architecture, the vine is something that was happening on the traditional.
And there's a big difference between indigenous and traditional. So if you really look at the people who were indigenous, the first people on the land, they're often run off the land and lost their land. And their practices often involve moving towards food and shelter and rivers,
Ναι,
not living in one place and
Ah,
having stores and cultivating.
Εντάξει, ευχαριστώ.
I was in Iraq, the Tigris Euphrates. It's a desert today of rolling sand hills. And that's been traditional practice, and it's been goats that's eaten nearly everything until they turned it into desert, as goats will. So that's traditional. So we select traditional indigenous carefully for what looks after the land and the species and life and biodiversity.
I have a question. I don't know if it's right or to say that, but do you feel to have your way to come here is a political way, or it's more philosophical or more active way to come? Because, yeah, it's like this.
Okay, another good question. And maybe my response would be connected to what our friend here said before, what he was asking about how to make this bridge. What I've seen that has worked the best in the rural areas that I've lived in is when people bring new ideas like permaculture and show examples that work, such as gardens that are productive and that work, or natural building, a really well made and designed and built passive house that can cool itself in summer and heat itself in winter. I've seen, older people in villages see it and say, okay, yeah, I get it. Or, oh yeah, my grandfather used to have a building like that. So there's a practical element, but it's really, for me right now, I personally am most interested in the social element. Maybe it could be called political, I'll call it social, but because I think that another thing that works is when people like us bringing in these ideas show interest in the people who have been living there and find out how they're producing, how they're living, what are their ideas, and then it's an exchange. It's so different from the opposite, which doesn't work, which is new people coming in with fancy ideas, not having interest in the local people, and not having things that they can show that actually work. And I've also seen a lot of that as well. But what we say in permaculture is that when our permaculture projects fail, when communities and eco-villages fail, it's usually not a technical problem. It's not that the solar panels weren't producing enough electricity, it's not that the compost pile wasn't working so well, or the gray water system got stuck. It's that people enter into conflict. It's over and over again that because the modern society that we're living in is very individualistic, and of course I'm from the most individualistic society ever in our species history, the United States, it's that we're not trained, we don't learn when we're young how to work and live well together. So to answer your question, I think what I'm really focused on is tools and skills for living together, for collaborating, for dealing with conflict, because we're always going to have conflict as people. And that to me is one of the keys to scaling up, or to really implementing permaculture on a larger scale.
And I'm working in a different world. I chose to work in worlds of war and civil war, and then refugees. So it's quite a different world, and a lot of it Asia. And the Asians don't talk that much about I, they talk about we. And if you say to them, how will you get this done? No one can do anything on their own, they say. No one, we all have to have each other. And of course, going through the wars and common enemy and villages, they don't see things as able to be achieved. And personal merit and shining is seen only to be gratifying the family, not the individual. So they don't have a meritocracy to compete and do brilliantly. It's much more, it's for your family you're doing this. So there's an element of service. And they will also say you can't do anything anywhere without relationship. You have to know someone. And I've met business people in, say, Hanoi, and they will say, I don't know what's wrong with them. We had this meeting and I put this perfectly great proposition to them and said, you could make $1 million. And I will hang around and then I'll say, why didn't you like that? They say, we didn't have any relationship with that person. So they want situations where there is some more trust and understanding than we do. And that, of course, led to big problems with the American War in Vietnam, because they would be operating from a community wants, needs. America would be operating. And they were like planes, one flying this way and one flying that way. They never met, and I've read the documents. So then if you take permaculture, they say, oh, we can do something with that. People with enormous need in refugee camps with almost nothing, 4 children, 5 children in a blue tent. If you teach them how to put a seed in a plastic pot or a rice bag, they'll come back in the morning and say, we've done that, what do we have to do next? Not say, I don't know if I want to do that, I don't know if I feel I want to do that or not. It's done. So different responses around the world to permaculture and what it offers.
Περισσότερες ερωτήσεις?
There's no one here, no one talking. They've all gone home. Oh yes, microplastics is one of those interesting topics, because we all contribute. As people across the world, we're contributing. And it's very, very difficult. Have you tried to get plastic out of your life? It is so hard. I try all the time. But various things can start to do it. One is, any time you're offered plastic, I say, no thanks, I don't take plastic. No thanks, no plastic. No, don't want plastic. And in a shop, I will undo a plastic wrapper and say, can you get rid of the plastic? It's your problem. So that's one thing. The other thing is at the source. We need to destroy, it's like saying use less petrol, but it's really the petrol people pushing it, a huge sale force to produce petrol, fossil fuels. It really, if they were responsible, they would do it at that level, but they're not. So it's up to us. And then we can also gradually get our local government areas to ban one-use single plastics in shops, so they're not allowed. And it's like here, you do see people with their basket and their bag going to the market, but it is an enormous problem. And for a while I thought it might be benign, that you could absorb it and it would sit there, but I was reading the other day, it's bioaccumulative. So they gradually develop power and they cross levels in the brain and in the body. Very hard to avoid. And I think there is alarm by biochemists and people who really know about this, but it doesn't mean you can actually pull back on the plastic industry. But I think I took nearly all the electrical things and as much plastic as I could out of my place. It's so little, but there's nothing too small and nothing too big that's positive, that doesn't matter. It does matter. Take your toothpaste tube and deliver it back to the pharmacy or wherever you bought it. Say, you get rid of this properly. It's okay to do it. They should be doing it themselves, and if they're not, we're reminding them. But it is an enormous problem. They're too small, that's the problem. Yeah. So some things are pretty difficult. But let's keep trying, because would you want to be part of the solution or part of the problem? You know, I just don't want to think I'm part of the problem. I do what I can. It's the only way. The option of being part of the problem is destroy my head. Alfred, you can talk.
Okay, I mean, if there's anything no more questions, we can also say have a closer. Υπάρχουν άλλα σχόλια, ερωτήσεις? Γεια σας. Ήρθατε στο τέλος της θα υπάρξει βίντεο, το οποίο θα προσπαθήσω να το ανεβάσω. Θα προσπαθήσω να το ανεβάσω κάποια στιγμή στο ίντερνετ. Οπότε θα είναι διαθέσιμο για να το στείλετε αν θέλετε σε άλλα άτομα. Ναι. Θες να έρθω με το μικρόφωνο ή θα σου το πεις έτσι? Έλα.
Well, one response, so the question that I heard is they want to live the permaculture way in a village, and what kind of help can we offer, or where can you get support for this? There is a really good resource who is sitting right next to me, who was a student of mine 6 years ago, and now I can see what he's doing. He just has much more knowledge than I have about agriculture and life, and he's here, and he's active, and he's passionate, and he and his colleagues are doing the only permaculture design courses in Greece in Greek language, and I think that's a great resource. I mean, but also, I really think, in answer to your question, a lot of it is just common sense. There's the saying, permaculture is common sense applied very strongly. So that there's all the techniques that are available on the internet that you need, but a lot of it, if you want to go to live in the village with these people who've been there forever, is just to come with humility, to be modest, to have interest in what they do and their ideas, to have fun, and to show them, okay, what you're doing makes sense. And then they can see, okay, this guy's not crazy, he actually is doing something that makes sense.
Yeah, and although it's common sense, there's also quite a lot of applied science. So that if you are building a new house of materials, you don't want the roof to leak, or you want the windows on the right side, or you want oriented towards the sun in a way and angle your solar panels so you have fewer panels and best effect. You want to put it on the land so you've got water uphill for gravity, not put your water downhill and then pump it up. So it's common sense, but it's shortcuts. People do it and say, oh, this is just natural, but they wouldn't have thought of it, and they didn't have the sequence. And you finish a course with a design for your place or village or hospital or whatever you're doing, you've got something to start with, and we nearly always start with water.